Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bright Spots. I'm Laurie Labishak, your happiness ambassador, coming to you again on Wednesday evening for an exciting episode. Our guest this evening is just inspirational and motivational. I just can't wait for you to meet her. I really can't. It has been a joy to talk with her off camera for a few minutes, and I know that you're truly going to enjoy getting to know Dr. Clamon. So before we get started, for those of you that are just joining us, please drop a message down below. Let us know that you're here. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And if it's your first time viewing Bright Spots, or if you are a veteran Bright Spot viewer, we would love to know that. Also, if you have questions for our guests throughout the evening, please be sure and type those below as well. And we will be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I would like to remind you that Bright Spots is booking guests into 2021 now. So if you know a bright spot or you are a bright spot and you'd like to be on the show, please visit brightspotsov.com and book your appointment today so that we can get you scheduled in 2021. I think January is full, but February still has a few dates and on into the year. Would love to have any one of you on as a guest to tell us your story and tell us about your bright spots. Okay, so we all know what to do. Drop us a line down below. Let us know that you're here. Let us know where you're tuning in from. And if this is your first time tuning in, we'd like to know that as well. I hope you've had a great week. It's been a beautiful week here in Ohio so far. We had a little bit of rain today, but other than that, hasn't been too bad. Kind of chilly in the 50s, but snow's a-coming, right, guys? Got to get ready for it. Well, I hope you're ready for the weekend as well. And the weather looks like it's going to be a little bit better on the weekend. So, well, here we go, guys. We're going to get right into this. We see a few of you have hopped on, and I'd like to introduce our guest. Our guest this evening, as I mentioned, is Dr. Elizabeth Clamon. And I hope I'm saying that right, Elizabeth. We didn't talk about that off camera. Dr. Clamon is the founder and CEO of the Clamon Group, LLC, Fiercely Unstoppable Life, Business Growth Coaching and Consulting, Relentless Hearts Ministries, and Elizabeth Clamon, international speaker, entrepreneur. Work with her to become fiercely unstoppable in business and life. She guides people to start, grow, and excel in business and still have the life they love. Elizabeth has built multi-six-figure businesses despite moving 10 times, homeschooling 3 children, often on her own while her husband was deployed with the military, and all the while she earned a doctorate degree. Talk about accomplished, right, guys? Let's welcome to the Bright Spot studio, Dr. Elizabeth Clamon.
Hi.
Hello. It is so good to see you.
You too. It's so good to be with you. And please, it's just Elizabeth.
Okay, Elizabeth.
And Clamon is fine. Everybody pronounces it differently, so it works.
Well, with a name like Labishak, I'm always thinking, am I saying it correctly when I say someone else's name? So,
well, being that military, everywhere you move, people pronounce it differently, so we've just kind of gotten used to it.
Well, my maiden name was Wade, 4 letters. I probably should have stuck with that.
Nah, I tell people that Clamon was a package deal. It came with my husband, so it was a good package. It's been 36 years, so it's worked out.
There you go. So, Elizabeth, tell us a little bit more about you as far as we talked about who you are and the businesses that you do, but how did you get to where you are? What makes you fiercely unstoppable?
Oh, life makes me fiercely unstoppable. I don't know about anybody else, but if you have that experience of life keeps knocking you down and you get back up, and it keeps knocking you down and you get back up. That seems to be what my story is. The beginning of my story I tell in my book, Beauty Rising from Brokenness, and that's my journey through childhood trauma, and that led to chronic illness in my 30s. I don't know what it is about us girls, but we hit the 30s and we just can't seem to keep everything still buried that has gone on. We have to kind of face it and deal with it. And so that's where I found myself with severe asthma and bronchitis and chronic fatigue syndrome, which developed into full-blown fibromyalgia. And I just could not keep going. And I had to face those things that happened to me in my childhood, walk through the healing. And as someone who was in the process of getting my naturopathic degree, I wanted to do it in a natural, holistic way, in a way that God intended for us to heal our bodies. And so I walked through counseling, and I talk about healing mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and physically in this book, and what I walked through while I was going through that period in my life. And I think that's really important, because we are a four-sided person. You know, God made us all one person, and Western medicine likes to break us up into pieces. They like to, you know, send us to the foot doctor or the head doctor or the heart doctor. And sometimes those things that we're going through physically can be caused by emotional things or traumas that we've gone through in our earlier in our life. So I walk you through not only my story, but also through how to heal and how to recognize some of those traumas and things that have happened that have happened to you too. And, you know, I have a lot of people that tell me when I speak, well, I haven't lived through all of that. You know, I haven't had a traumatic childhood. And sometimes a trauma can be as simple as somebody saying something flipped to you when you were a child that they don't even think about. And I use the example of when I was 17, I loved country music. Well, to tell you the truth, I still love country music, but I love to sing at the top of my lungs with the radio. And I had a friend that rode to school with me, and I made the comment, I think I want to be a country western singer. And she said, I think you need to get a new dream. And that label stuck to me. And if any of you have experienced that, where somebody says something to you, you're just not smart enough, you're just not pretty enough, you're just not thin enough, and that label sticks to you. You stick that label and you walk around with that label and you tell yourself, it repeats in your head. And I spent 30 years letting that thing that she said that she doesn't even remember saying, we're still friends, and she doesn't remember. And I let that label stick to me, and I would not sing in church, or I would sing in the choir in a midst of a lot of other um, voices, but I wouldn't step out and sing on my own because I believed what she said. And I actually, the last speaking that I did before COVID, I requested that I be able to sing a song with the praise and worship group at the church that I was speaking at. And I talked about limiting beliefs and about labels that we put on ourselves and how to step out of that. And I actually demonstrated myself stepping out of that 30-year label of telling myself I couldn't sing, and cried most of the time. And you can find the video on Facebook. And I'm standing there just crying, but singing, and stepped out of that label. And I'm sure that many of you have probably experienced that as well. So, you know, that was my first blow that knocked me down. And I walked through that and got healing from that. And my family went on a family vacation about 6 months after I started feeling better and feeling back to myself. And I had just finished up my doctorate degree and was getting ready to start my own practice, and was so excited to get started in the next phase of my life and do that part-time while we were homeschooling our kids. And on our way back from vacation, we had met my husband's family in Kentucky for a family reunion. And we were coming into Michigan, where we lived at the time. My husband's military. So we've lived a little bit of everywhere. And we were traveling through construction. If you know anything about the northern states, there are two seasons, construction and winter. And we happened to be in July, which was construction season. And all of the lanes were shifting to the right, and the trucks were supposed to be in the main lane, and we were supposed to be on the one that shifted to the shoulder, and we were pulling our camper, and our 16 and 18-year-old daughters were following in the truck because the two younger kids and I had gone home to Louisiana for a visit, and we had met them in Kentucky, and we were behind a semi truck that did not follow the construction signs and get over like he was supposed to. And he stayed on that shoulder of the road. And about 6 miles into Michigan, he got to a bridge that was decorative and it kind of curved over. And he didn't think he could clear the bridge. And he slammed on his brakes. He was empty. He had dropped off his cargo in Ohio and was going back to Canada. Well, you can't stop you can't stop a camper like that. So I had turned around to answer my 11-year-old son's question in the back seat, and I noticed out of the corner of my eye, my husband hit the brakes with both feet. And my brain just kind of registered, you can't stop the camper like that. And all of a sudden, all I knew was crunching metal and smoke and airbags and my son screaming at the top of his lungs. And I couldn't figure out how to get to him. I couldn't figure out where I was, what was going on. Well, what happened was the truck stopped. My husband could not stop the camper. So we hit the semi truck. The camper hit us. Then our 16 and 18-year-old daughters that were driving my husband's truck hit the camper, and the camper hit us again. So we had 3 impacts within probably a matter of maybe a couple of minutes, probably not even that long. And my husband had to crawl in the back seat and kick the windows out to get us out because we were trapped in the truck and underneath the back of the semi truck. Pulled my son out. My daughters were able to get out of the truck and put my son on the shoulder of the road with my daughters, and came back, had to crawl back in and give me point by point instructions how to get out because I was in shock. My son screaming, that was really me screaming, because when your body's in shock, your brain doesn't recognize what is going on, and you can't comprehend. I knew there was a phone ringing, but not how to get to it. I knew that, my husband had gotten out of the car and gotten our son out, but I didn't know how to get out. I couldn't even unbuckle my seatbelt. So my husband came back through the window, unbuckled the seatbelt, got me out of the car, gave me step-by-step directions, and I had kicked my shoes off. I was reading a book. I didn't have shoes on. He had to take me on his back over to where the kids were. And as soon as I got to where my kids were, mom mode kicked in, and I started checking my kids. Are you okay? And checked, my oldest daughter had cuts and burns on her arms, very superficial from the airbag deploying out of the steering wheel. My middle daughter seemed to be fine. She didn't seem to have anything visible. My son, who was 11, had bruises literally from his chin to his knees. He was already just black and blue. And I was immediately terrified for his safety. I was on the phone with my mother-in-law trying to tell her what happened because they were about an hour ahead of us, waiting on us to get there to go to dinner with them. And I all of a sudden looked up and saw my husband walking up and down the middle of the interstate in amongst the wreckage on the phone. And then he just falls out in the middle of the interstate. And I'm like, what in the world? And I'm like, my husband, Arnold just fell down. I have to go. And I just hung up on my mother-in-law. I think about that now and I think, oh, my poor mother-in-law, because I'm a mother-in-law now. And I think, oh my goodness, if somebody had told me my son just fell out in the middle of the highway after this major accident, I don't know what I would do. But I went over to him and are you all right? And he said, yeah, I just needed to sit down. And I'm like, could you have chosen a less dramatic way to do it? Because I've already had a lot of stuff going on. So needless to say, very traumatic experience. My entire family went to the hospital because all of our cars were completely destroyed, and went to the hospital by ambulance. Everybody checked out, even my son. Praise God, my entire family was fine, other than some cuts and scrapes and a lot of bruises on my son. He had no internal injuries. Everybody was okay, and everybody was able to go home from the hospital. Now, I don't know if you're like me, but I walk in a hospital and I don't care for what reason I'm there. If I'm there to visit somebody, if I'm there to go look at the nursery and see the babies, my first question when I walk in the door is, when can I go home? So that was the question I kept asking. When can I go home? Because I had been gone from home for 2 weeks and I was really, really ready to be home. And the doctor came in and said, you're not going to be going home. You're going to be going to the cardiac ward because you have a broken sternum and you could have damage to your heart and damage to your pericardium, which is the sac that surrounds the heart. And that could cause you to have a sudden heart attack and die. So we have to monitor you for a few days. So they sent me to the cardiac ward. I was on the cardiac ward for 5 days. My husband, who's absolutely the most amazing man I've ever met in my entire life, he stayed with me the entire time. He never left me, even though he'd been in the same accident, slept in one of those awful fold out hospital chairs that they give you in a room with somebody. And he stayed there the entire 5 days. And his mom and dad would, and our kids would come every day and bring us food and whatever we needed. And when I got home at the ripe old age of 38, I was 100% Social Security disabled and bedridden for 12 years. You heard me right, 12 years. That was awful. You talk about a nightmare. That was a nightmare. And I didn't ever think I was going to get out of that bed. I thought that was it. It was over. And I went to doctor after doctor after doctor, and I got diagnosis after diagnosis. I think at this point, I'm at about 15 surgeries since that accident. I not only had that broken sternum, but I had a severe whiplash, which caused a concussion. I was literally just locked over like this in pain, could not lift my head, could not lift my arms. I had a ruptured disc in my back, which had to have a fusion in that, and I had damage to both my knees. So I was a pretty big mess. And I kept going to doctors for years, and I would have a surgery, or I would have shots, or they would give me more medication, and I just wasn't getting better, and I wasn't getting any better, and I was getting worse. And at one point, at about probably about 6 years into this, I went into a doctor's office for an appointment, and she ran all kinds of tests and came back and said, there's not anything with you. You have severe fibromyalgia from the car accident, and you're just going to have to learn to live this way. And I said, you don't understand. I can't get out of bed. I can't live this way. God called me into ministry in 2002. He told me I was going to be a speaker, and it was very clear. And he confirmed it through our youth pastor's wife the next Sunday at church, which had no idea what I had heard from God. Then he confirmed it in scripture. I told her, I said, I believe what God told me, and I can't do that from bed. She said, there's a lot of things you can do on a computer. You're just going to have to learn to live this way. You have to learn from bed. And I promptly told her that she was fired, and I left. And I went to another doctor. And I just never could find a doctor that could help me. And in 2016, I had to have another surgery, and it was an outpatient surgery. And I was in the hospital after surgery, and I was in so much horrific pain. I just can't even explain to you how bad the pain was. And they could not control it. I blew 3 IVs. I had a pain pump, and I was still going into shock. My teeth were chattering. I was just breaking out in a cold sweat, and I was just shaking all over. And I just had this moment of clarity. And if you've ever had that where you reach a point in your life, and this has happened to me twice now, where I've reached a point in my life where I just said, I'm done. I'm just done. I looked at my husband and I said, I'm done. At that point, I was taking 120 Percocets a month, 30 Dilaudid for breakthrough pain. I was getting shots in my back, shots in my neck, and shots in my occipital nerves for migraines. And I looked at my husband and I said, I am done with their way to do it. I know how to do this naturally. I learned, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to make a plan. I'm going to write the plan down and I'm going to work that plan until I'm off of all this medication and I'm able to get up and do what God has called me to do, because He gave me a purpose. He put me in this earth for a purpose, and I'm going to serve that purpose. And I just made up my mind. And that's really what you have to do. It's a mindset. It is a mindset, just like that story of singing. It was a mindset. I could sing, and I was robbing myself of joy, and I was robbing God of joy, because God says that he loves the praises of his people, that he finds joy in our song, in our praises. And I was robbing myself by continuing to toxify my body with all that medication. And so I made up my mind, and it was a mindset change. But the part of the mindset change was writing that plan down and working that plan every day. And I took a half a pill less for a month. And then I took a half a pill less for another month. And I went through until I was off of all of that medication. And the number one question most people ask me at this point is, how did you get up out of that bed? And now that you stand on stage and give speeches that sometimes are an hour long, and I did it one step at a time. I got out of the bed and sat in the chair for 15 minutes. And then I got out of the bed and I stood for 5 minutes. And then I got out of the bed and I got on the exercise bike for 5 minutes, and one step at a time. Some days it was 1 minute. Some days it was 3 minutes, because your body is conditioned to what it was going through. So you have to take it slowly. Everything in life is a process. And people will tell you, oh, you just need to get over that. You just need to forgive them. Well, if you've been through a very traumatic experience, forgiveness is a process. And that getting back up was a process. And by the time we moved here to North Carolina, I had found a doctor in Minnesota, where we were stationed the last who had diagnosed me correctly, put me on the right medications. After I had gotten myself off the other medications, I got myself back into healthy eating, herbs to detoxify my body, so forth and so on. And I worked that plan every day, and I still work that plan every day to get up and to do what God has purposed me to do. And so that's why I call myself fiercely unstoppable, because I just refuse to quit. I did my DNA, and QUIT was not in it. So I don't quit, and you don't have to quit either. I read a devotional the other day that I thought was so amazing. It said that until your purpose on this earth is done, you are essentially immortal, because God has a purpose and a plan for your life. Now, you can go out and be dumb and jump off a roof or jump off a bridge or do something that interrupts God's plan. But if you are pursuing God's plan and purpose for your life, then you are not going to be able to stop his purpose. And neither can Satan. Satan can throw all of these things in your way, but he cannot stop God's purpose for your life. As long as you are breathing, you have a purpose. I don't care how old you are or what you've been through. And the unstoppableness didn't stop there. This last year has been quite the unstoppable life as well, with another accident and a knee surgery that went very wrong, and ended up having to have 3 surgeries to correct the one knee surgery because I was allergic to the metal in the implant. And another car accident
Oh
last
my.
year in 2019, in the midst of all the knee mess. Another car accident, a guy hit us from behind going about 80 miles an hour and left me with a ruptured and torn rotator cuff that I had repaired in January, and I'm still dealing with it. I was just telling Lori before we got on that I had a steroid shot in it yesterday because it's still giving me. If anybody has ever had rotator cuff surgery, it has got to be one of the worst surgeries and the worst recoveries. But I just know my purpose and I know what God has called me to do, and I just won't quit. I just won't.
So I love that you talk about purpose and being fiercely unstoppable and going towards your purpose. Let's talk a little bit about purpose. And you said you knew that your purpose that God had given you was to be a speaker and to inspire other women, other people.
Yes.
Um, how did that happen? Like, how do you explain? Because I'm sure there's a lot of people watching that maybe are not sure what their purpose is. What's the best way to find your purpose? Kind of hone in on it.
And I work with a lot of people on finding your purpose and honing in on your purpose. And for me, it was a lot. There's a lot of discovery involved. But one of the first things that I do is I do a spiritual gifts test. So you want to find out what your spiritual gifts are, and they change over time. So we do a spiritual gifts test. We talk about we write down, what have you done in the past, even if you're in your 20s. You've done things. What did you like? What games did you like to play when you were a kid? What things did you like to do when you were a kid? What hobbies did you have? Have you had um, any volunteer jobs that you like to do? Have you had any jobs that you really loved? And for me, my calling was very clear. I was at a Women of Faith conference, and I was sitting there with all the ladies from our church, and we were kind of spread out over different areas because we had a large group. And I was listening to the speakers, and I just heard God impress on my heart, I want you to do that. I want you to speak, and I want you to inspire and empower women to pursue their purpose, to do what they're called to do. And I want you to inspire them. And I knew at the time I had this story of beauty rising from brokenness and my childhood trauma. And I thought, well, that's probably what I'll speak about. I had no idea what was coming. God rarely gives you the details ahead of time, which is a really good thing, because I'd be terrified if he had told me everything that was coming. But and then I went to church the following Sunday, and we were actually preparing to move to our next duty station. And the youth pastor's wife, who was way across the auditorium from me, came up to me and she said, I was thinking during that conference we went to this weekend that you'd be really great at that. You would be really great at sharing your stories of being in the military and moving and homeschooling. And my jaw hit the floor because I didn't even have youth at the time. My kids were younger. And I thought, there is no way that she could have known what God told me, what I heard. There was just no way. And then in my Bible study a few weeks later, I was reading my devotional, and it was on Isaiah 61, 1-3. I have anointed you to preach the good news, and to heal the brokenhearted. And that that those words just jumped off the page at me. And I was like, wow, okay, that's what God wants me to do. And so I surrendered to ministry, and not knowing what I was headed into. But when I work with people on finding their purpose, we try to find the nuggets. We talk about the things they like to do, the things they dream about doing, the things that they imagine that they could do. If I was a fairy and I could sprinkle fairy dust on you and you could do anything in the world you ever wanted to do, what would that be? If you don't know, then we hone in on, what do you like to do? And if anybody had told me that I was going to be an international best-selling author, I would have laughed at them, because I am the world's worst speller. I cannot spell to save my life, anything. And you become an international bestselling author because God gives us tools now that help us and wonderful editors that have that gift. And so I can write a story, I can tell a story. So I also teach storytelling. And I tell people that if you have a dream of being a best-selling author, if you have a dream of telling your story from stage, or if I'm working with somebody who's been through trauma and we need to work on that trauma and find out what's triggering these problems and illnesses and things that they're dealing with now, we write. And that can be just for them, just a journal. And then we pick the nuggets out of there that give us, God always gives us hints and ideas and things that we think about, that we dream about, things we think, I'd like to do that. And then if it's something you've never done, but you think, oh, maybe I might want to do that. And I started out speaking I started out speaking in vacation Bible school and Sunday school to kids who didn't really appreciate it very much, but I enjoyed it. But when I really started speaking, I was working for Weight Watchers, and I became a Weight Watcher leader, and I absolutely loved that job. It was my favorite job I've ever had. So that kind of gave me a clue that I liked standing in front of people and teaching them and inspiring them. So there are all those nuggets along the way, and I did that back in the 80s and 90s when my kids were really little. And so, there are little things all along the way that will give you nuggets to tell you things that you like to do. Did you like to write in high school? Did you like to tell stories? Did you like poetry? There's all different kinds of things that we go through that we write down, and writing is so important because that's where we can glean the information, and that gets it out of our head and puts it on paper. And in situations like Beauty Rising from Brokenness, once I wrote that, it took all of that burden off of me. All of those things no longer had power over me. So writing is huge. Even if you're just writing, a sentence or two in a journal for yourself. And I have stacks of journals. You can see my books. And there's like 3 more bookcases back there that you can't see that have just stacks and stacks of journals on them with where I have written. I write out prayers. And those things give me nuggets to choose from. So when I'm working with somebody in that area of finding their purpose, that's some of the things that we do to look for their purpose.
That's wonderful. So, folks, if you're just joining us, this is Bright Spots, another episode, and our guest this evening is Elizabeth Clamon, and she is an inspiration with all that she's been through, and she is fiercely unstoppable, and she's currently working on her 7th book, correct?
That's correct.
And your 7th book, the title is?
Fiercely Unstoppable Love is it's actually written. My readers, if any of my people that are on Facebook that tracked me down, because they are tracking me down. It was supposed to be out last year, but we had this second accident and it didn't come out, because Beauty Rising from Brokenness kind of leaves you hanging, because that's what all good authors do, don't they? So you get the next book. And so it will be out the first of the year, I promise. And it is written by myself and my husband, mostly by me, a little by him, because guys don't have as many words. But it tells the story of the accident from both of our perspectives. So, and how we managed to continue to homeschool our kids and to get the housework done and the cooking and because he didn't pay bills, he didn't grocery shop, he didn't do any of those things that I did. I went to school and homeschooled the kids and did all of those household things that he had to learn to do. So it kind of talks about how we managed to work together to get everything done, and how our daughters at 16 and 18 really pitched in, and the whole family did too, our son as well. And our son became a musician. He started begging and begging for guitar lessons, and he even started going up to the guys at church and begging them to teach him guitar. And we were like, you've never had any interest in guitar. But he was so emotionally upset from the wreck that he was drawn to music, and he picked it up, and he had a gift and a talent for it that we never would have known. And Romans 8:28 is my absolute favorite verse. All things work together for good of those who love the Lord and are called according to his purpose. And I prayed that for 12 years and said, Lord, I love you, and I know I'm called according to your purpose. So I know somehow this is going to be good. Although laying in this bed right now, I don't see how it's going to be good. I can't see the forest for the trees. But now looking back, I can see how God was using it to raise my husband up to be the head of the household, how he was equipping my daughters, my middle daughter, who was painfully shy. She had to come out of her shell and go to the grocery store and pick things up, mail something from at the post office, which would give her a package, and I'd say, you realize you have to talk to the postman. It's going to be okay. And she'd be like, it's okay, Mom, I can do it. I can do it. And, things that we didn't realize, his gifting for music, we had no idea. To this day, he plays in the praise and worship band. He has a friend that he records music with, and they're on Spotify, and they have several songs out on Spotify. And just things that we had, that God used all of that for good. And he taught me a lot about faith and a lot about being unstoppable, a lot about standing up to myself to doctors. And he taught me a lot about grit, about, getting up and getting on that exercise bike wasn't easy, but, I did it. And I tell people you can do it too. You just have to have that defining moment of, I'm done with this being this way, and I'm going to make a change. And then you make a plan and you work the plan every day.
So you mentioned that your husband is in the military and you moved frequently. So during the 12 years that you were bedridden, were you also relocated during that time?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yes.
The accident happened in Michigan, when we were living in Michigan. And then we relocated to Louisiana. Then we relocated to Minnesota. And now we're in North Carolina. So 4 times. And by the time we got to North Carolina, I was starting to get better. I was on the road to getting back on my feet and getting better, but still not, fortunately with my husband's position, they pack us and move us and everything. So I didn't have to do all of that, but still having to get from one place to another, having to readjust and to new climates, especially when you go from Louisiana to Minnesota. I've quite often asked God, could we get somewhere in the middle so I can adjust before we go, right? Jump into the hot or the cold.
So tell us a little bit about this book. Was this the first book that you wrote?
That is I have 4 collaboration books. So I've written a chapter in 4 collaboration books. This is my first book that is my book. I wrote this one myself. And like I said, as a non-speller and non-writer and somebody who took 5 maths in high school and only had to have 3, writing was not high on my priority list. But God woke me up at 6 o'clock one morning and said, it's time to write this story. And I thought it would be really difficult, but the Holy Spirit just poured it out of me. And it became a memoir, but also a self-help book. And so that is, I believe, book number 4. And then I've done a couple other collaboration books. And like I said, book number 2, this is a 3 series, because we have this is early life up until my 30s. And then the second book is about the car accident, and my husband and I walk through that. And then the third book will be about this, as when I go back to my surgeon that I just went to yesterday, he tells me every time I go in, well, you have another chapter for the next book. And I'm like, I don't want any more chapters. I'm done. But he loves for that to be his joke. You have another chapter? I'm like, I'm good. I'm really good. I've got plenty to write about. But that will be book 3. This will be a trilogy. But the book I'm working on right now is called Fiercely Faithful. Be Inspired. Oh, I can't, it's failing me, the subtitle, but it's Fiercely Faithful. And it's a collaboration book that I'm actually the collaborator on. So I'm putting together everyone's stories, and it's stories of people who have walked through difficult times and how their faith has brought them through and how God has been fiercely faithful through that situation. And we have some just amazing stories. Those stories are starting to come in. I've interviewed everybody for the book, and now that the stories are coming in and I'm seeing them in writing, they're just amazing. I think 6 of the chapters now are at the editors, and the book will be coming out December the 15th, and we will have a virtual summit that goes with the book. And so it'll be out the same week, the 15th. And if anybody wants information about that, they can get in touch with me through Facebook, through Instant Messenger, or on Facebook. And I'm also looking for more authors. If you want to write a chapter real quickly, because we're getting down to the wire here, mid-November, we are due to turn everything over to the publishers. And the publisher that I'm working with is it guarantees you Amazon #1 Amazon bestseller. So the book will be an Amazon #1 bestseller. But every book she has launched in 2020 has been an international bestseller. And what excites me the most about this book is God laid this on my heart in April after everything happened with COVID. And I thought, and God told me to focus on the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and how they went through the fiery furnace and they came out and they didn't even smell like smoke. And that just jumped off the page at me, that they didn't even smell like smoke. And so we did, and God told me, ask these people to do the summit. And who says yes, and who says no, says no. And I had 12 people come back and say yes. And we did the summit. You can find it under Fierce Faith on it's just a Facebook page that I did, and it's also on my YouTube channel, which is just under my name, Elizabeth Clamon. And then God came back to me in July and said, okay, we're going to do part 2. And I was kind of like, but wait, I checked that box, God. I did a good job. I got my gold star. And God said, no, we're going to do a book too, and we're going to do another summit. And so I have 14 authors right now that are contributing to the book. And then like I said, I have room for up to 20. So she said 12 to 20 is what the publisher told me. So I've got room for up to 20. And we're getting stories in every day, and they're going to the editor. And it's so exciting. And we had to change it to Fiercely Faithful because there's already a Fierce Faith book out there. So I didn't know that when I did the first summit. And then hopefully, if everything goes right, we will be able to do a live event in January in Branson, Missouri. We have a lady that's doing a chapter that is an event planner in Branson, and she's going to get us a venue called King's Castle, which I think is so perfect. And we're going to do a live event and just do a one-day event, and all the authors will be able to do a book signing, and the authors will be able to speak and share some of their stories, and we'll have music, and it's a 1,200 seat auditorium. So if we need to socially distance, we'll have 600 or we'll have 300 or whatever we'll need to do. We put our mask on, we'll have our sanitizer, whatever we have to do. But hopefully that's going to go through, because speaking is what God called me to do. It is my heart. It's what I love. I love writing, but I really love speaking. But this book has been so much fun, and God has just amazed me at the stories of faith through this book. So again, if anybody's interested in that, there is a fee to pay for the publishing, to help split the cost of the publishing. I split it between everybody. So there is a fee. I always say that up front, because people are like, oh, I have a story. And then I'm like, but there's a cost because of the publisher. And they're like, oh, I don't want to pay anything. I understand, but books don't publish themselves for free. So there's lots of costs to them. So editors and book designers, cover designers, and it's a lot. God's teaching me a lot through this, and the stories are amazing. So, look for that in December and watch my page, because The summit will be coming out. The book will be launching. And I'm so excited about what God is doing. And that's my happy spot. That's my bright spot in COVID, because when COVID happened, I was just like, oh, all of my speaking, just everything went away. And, and then you're shut in the house. And when you're an extreme extrovert like I am, that's extremely hard. And when you're a Southerner and you like to hug people, that makes it even worse. And God said, nope, I have a project for you. So
that's great. Well, before we end our segment, I would like to share your website so that folks can see that and let them know how to get a hold of you. And I also have a question about this picture on your homepage. So was this your church? Tell us about this event that you're speaking at here.
This is actually we're co-teaching, another lady and I, and we're doing a workshop at a large conference.
Okay. And was this before your accident or after?
After. All of my speaking has been after. Yeah, since I came back.
But God had called you to speak prior to the accident, correct?
2002, and the accident happened in 2005.
Okay.
And so I've just been doing this for about 2.5 years.
Okay. All right.
And then if you scroll down below that, there's a couple of videos. There's How Did I Become Broken? That's the trailer for the book. And then the other one is me speaking about the accident. And you can also find those on YouTube. And then, of course, my book. And if you go on there and fill out that little form, you'll get the first 3 chapters for free. And those are downloadable. So you can kind of get a sample. And then just some other pictures of me speaking in different places. The middle one there is in Las Vegas. The top one, I'm speaking in Chicago. And the bottom one, I'm speaking in...
You've got cowboy boots on in that picture, so
yes,
you're in Texas.
I have spoken in Texas, but I don't remember if that picture was taken in Texas. But yes, I am known to wear cowboy boots. And depending on my audience, I am known to put a little bit of purple highlights in my little spikes of my hair. So I have a lot of personality. I throw emoji beach balls at my audience. I throw emoji keychains. I use a lot of props. I have here, when I'm talking about when you're having a bad day, you just put on your rose-colored glasses and keep going.
That's right. That's right.
When you have a lot of heavy stuff to talk about, humor makes it a lot easier to talk about it.
I couldn't agree more. Elizabeth, it has been such a joy to have you on Bright Spots. Is there anything you wanted to talk about that we haven't touched on yet this evening?
I don't think so, except for just keep the faith. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And, if we just keep doing things like this, and we keep, doing podcasts and virtual events and workshops and things like that, we will get through this, and we will, just support each other. This is our opportunity to grow our faith and our opportunity to support and love other people that we maybe would not have had a chance to otherwise, because we were so busy with our lives. So just keep the faith. It's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. And be fiercely unstoppable. Just get up every morning and say, I am fiercely unstoppable. QUIT is not in my DNA.
I love it. I'm going to use that. QUIT is not in my DNA.
Right, because if you quit, where are you going to be tomorrow or next week or next year? You're going to be exactly in the same. If I had quit, I'd still be in the bed. Yeah. And God gave me too many things to do to still stay in the bed.
I love it. I love it. Well, Elizabeth, thank you so much. It has been a joy to get to know you. And I hope our paths cross more and more in the future, and we get to know each other better.
Me
All right.
too, as I do too. I've had a wonderful time. Thank you so much.
Well, God bless you.
You too.
All right, folks, that ends our episode of Bright Spots for this week. I pray that you have a wonderful week and you'll come back next week for our guest. Robin Joy Myers will be with us next week, and I'm sure it's going to be another fascinating, inspiring episode. God bless you. I look forward to seeing you again. Bye-bye now.